And welcome to the Health Changers. All of us here are passionate about helping people to change their health destiny. Today's topics we're going to include, I'm going to be talking about hydration and why it's so important. Gareth is going to be talking about the 5 rules to get started on a plant-based lifestyle. Frank is going to be talking about stepping up to an SOS-free lifestyle, the evolution of a plant-exclusive diet. And Jayney, the lovely Jayney, she's going to be talking about resilience, what it is and why it's so important right now. So let me introduce our panel, our amazing panel. We have Dr. Frank Sabatino, who recently completed a book called WEIGHTLESS, Compassionate Weight Loss for Life. And he's got an online course called Lean for Life, The Science of Effective Weight Loss. And you can find more at drfranksabatino.com. And Jayney, the lovely Jayney, she is the president of the Complementary Medical Association, and she is a leading expert in the natural anti-aging and integrative medical fields, and she's written several amazing bestsellers. So check that out. You can see on jayneygoddard.org. And Gareth is, Gareth R, got to get that R in there, Davies, helps others to reduce or eliminate high blood pressure medication with the No Meds method. And you can connect with him on Facebook, Gareth R. Davies. And I am Jeanne Schumacher. I am the founder of Simply Plant Based, where I have a lot of programs to help you to change your health destiny. And just recently we launched the Pregnancy Advantage. So I'm so excited about that. We're helping women to get their bodies pregnant ready. So, and just the first one we had launched, we had Beth, who once she let the chutes down or the gates down, 6 weeks she got pregnant. So I'm very excited about that. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about hydration and why it is so important. Because our body is mostly comprised of water. I mean, like 75% of it. And you need this proper balance between water and electrolytes in our bodies, because this is going to determine how most of our systems are going to function, including nerves, muscles. There's a great word I like. It's called homeostasis or balance. And I just love that balance within our body. And you know when your body is not in balance. And let's just think about some of the benefits of fluids in our body or purpose of what they serve. First of all, it helps with lubrication. It helps remove waste through your urine. It helps to control your body temperature, your heart rate and blood pressure, and maintaining a healthy metabolism. I mean, all these things are affected. And if you don't have enough water in your body starts this process of shutting down. And it doesn't take that long either. Symptoms of dehydration can include things like changes in behavior, severe anxiety, confusion, rapid breathing, a rapid pulse, not being able to stay awake, faintness, or irritability. And finally, eventually you'll lose consciousness. Hopefully you won't get to that point. But without water, our body begins to shut down. And as little as a 2% decrease in body water can lead to dehydration. Decrease in higher levels, like 3 or 4%, can have altered physiological changes and could have health consequences, like it can affect your heart rate, your body temperature. All these pieces can be affected. Your body depends on water to survive. Water is needed for overall good health. I mean, like we're talking every cell, tissue, organ in your body needs water to work properly. If you don't have that, Houston, we're going to have a problem. So the path to improved wellness is, first of all, you should be drinking water. And we've been told to drink 6 to 8 glasses every day, which I guess that's a reasonable goal, but I don't think there's any scientific rationale behind that. As individuals, we need to be able to monitor, because I think each person is going to be a little bit different in terms of their needs of water. So, if you're concerned about if you're not getting hydrated enough, one of the things you can do is look at your urine. Take a minute, look at it and see what color it is in the toilet. If your urine is a light color or almost transparent, you're pretty good in terms of hydration. If it's a dark yellow, yeah, you're dehydrated. So you want to make sure that your urine is a very light in color. So that's a simple way to determine how much water or liquids that you need to be consuming. And obviously, water is the best choice, but you want to make sure that you're limiting things like caffeinated drinks. Caffeine can have such a huge impact, like if you're drinking coffee or something like that, that can have a huge impact on you. But also, I beg you, please don't drink the sports drinks or the energy drinks. They're not good choices for your health. They contain a lot of other things in them that you just really don't need. A lot of the sports drinks have a lot of sugar in them. And you can have easily up to, like, in one bottle of the sports drink, you can have at least 6-8 teaspoons of sugar. That's ridiculous. You wouldn't put 6 or 8 teaspoons of sugar on anything, never mind in something that you're drinking. One of the best ways, though, is to get hydrated is through your food. Things like watermelon. They're mostly water. Eating some watermelon is going to have an amazing benefit for you. I mean, you're going to get a lot of phytonutrients along with the fiber, but you're going to get a lot of water as well. So something like that is going to be great to help you, especially with summer coming on. And nothing screams summer like watermelon. But a lot of the fruits and vegetables do contain a lot of liquid in them, a lot of water. So that's going to also help you to stay hydrated.
One thing I'd just like to mention, for the longest time, we used to tell people, not to drink at mealtime because typically animals in nature drink and eat separately. We're finding now that sometimes hydration is actually a little better, having a little bit of liquid with meals, actually, while you're eating. Doesn't need to be a lot of liquid, but it doesn't move through the system as much, and it actually hydrates the cells a little bit better. So having a little bit of liquid at mealtime now, I think more people are comfortable with that.
Hi, Jean. Yes, I'd like to jump in with a question there. I'm really intrigued about your thoughts regarding, you touched on energy drinks, but what about electrolyte drinks that are sort of promoted as being either good for us in summer or if we're dehydrated through overexercise, that sort of thing? What are your thoughts there?
Oh, Jayney, most of those drinks are pretty much garbage. I mean, that's just my personal opinion, because usually those electrolyte drinks contain sugar, okay? They do contain electrolytes, and electrolytes are basically salts. And so you can create your own super easy sports drink yourself. Just take some water, good, and that's a big piece, is you want to make sure that you have a good source of quality water. And most of the water coming out today is pretty bad. And I have to say, as a chemistry teacher, I have been monitoring water and studying it for over 25 years. And so one of the things that I'm starting to learn about is, water is so oxidizing now in most of the places that it's coming in, even bottled water or even electrolytes. But that's a whole nother conversation. I could literally spend hours talking about that. So you want to make sure that you have a good source of water. And if people want to contact or connect with me to discuss that, I'd be happy to do that, because I could spend hours literally talking about, I've done a lot of testing on different types of water, bottled waters, different kinds of sports drinks, things like that. Most of them are extraordinarily acidic and oxidizing. I haven't found any bottled waters that are, even pH balanced. Even the ones that say they're pH, have a very high pH, typically don't, because they're not shelf stable. Anyway, I digress. You asked about the sports drinks, but you can make your own super easy electrolyte drink. Just take some water, take a lemon, squeeze the juice of a lemon into it, and then add a little bit, like maybe a tablespoon of maple syrup. And, this is to a large canteen, like maybe 30, 40 ounces, something like that. And then you can drink that as you're exercising. And that is a phenomenal sports drink, because you're getting a little bit of the glucose, you're getting a little bit of the electrolytes, from the lemon. So phenomenal sports drink, and easy, cheaper, and a lot better for you.
Well, that's really interesting, Jean, because the thing is that totally chimes with the World Health Organization's position, because they have something called the ORS, the Oral Rehydration Solution. It's saved countless lives, particularly in developing nations where they've had disasters, earthquakes, typhoons, that sort of thing. And it is exactly, as you say, a much more kind of pared back version of what you're just talking about. But it's simply a little bit of sugar, a little bit of salt in clean water. And you know, when they've had terrible typhoid or cholera outbreaks, this is a solution that has saved so many babies' lives, just a few drops of the ORS. So, you know, we can extrapolate, and, you know, obviously we're very privileged in our position to be able to add the fancy things. But, you know, it's the same thing, but it is such an important thing to understand how to actually balance and preserve our electrolyte homeostasis. So thank you for that.
And now let's move on to Gareth, who is going to be talking about the 5 rules to get started on a plant-based lifestyle.
Thank you, Jeanne. Thank you very much. Yes, I wish this had been available when I started out on an exclusively plant-based diet, because I made many, many mistakes over a period of time of moving from what was a typical Western diet to a plant-based, exclusively plant-based diet. So I'm trying to keep it really, really simple. 5 rules, and this is just to get started. Now, if you've been plant-based for a while and up your game, then stay tuned, because I know Dr. Sabatino is going to talk about that a little bit later. But to make it really easy for new people, number 1, 5 rules. Number 1, stop putting in the stuff into your body which is causing the problem in the first place. And what is that? That is meat, dairy. I love this, what Dr. Jeff Novick labels as crap, cutting out the crap, calorie rich and processed. So if stuff is calorie rich and processed, it's meat or dairy, then leave it out. Don't put it in your body. Very, very simple. Keep it simple for 3 meals. Now, if you think about it right now, you probably eat the same thing for breakfast every day. Most people do. I've been working with a group of guys this week and watching them in their general workplace. And I noticed that it's very Scandinavian. Obviously, I'm in Norway. It's very Scandinavian what they eat. Some bread with some like cream cheese on, and some fish, slice of fish or slice of meat on their bread. But the key thing is it's the same thing every single day, and they're quite happy with it. And you're probably quite happy with what you're eating every day. You don't get bored. So pick something, just 3 meals, 1 for breakfast, 1 for dinner, 1 for lunch. That's easy for you to make, easy for you to get your head around if you're new to plant-based. Personally, for breakfast, I either don't eat breakfast or I have porridge oats. Simple. Made with water, so quick, few minutes, and that's my porridge to start the day if I have a breakfast. Lunch, I learned again from Jeff Novick to make burgers and fries. Very, very simple food. And then even simpler for dinner is rice and vegetables. That's it. Up here in Norway, there's not too many fresh vegetables available. So it's frozen vegetables and rice. And I mean, again, it's a very, very quick meal to make. So that's rule number 2. Rule number 3 is don't fall for the supermarket Trojan horse. What I mean by that is, you know, if you're in the supermarket, you're in control of what you're putting in your trolley, and that trolley is a Trojan horse, because if you put crap in your trolley, it's going to get in your house. If it's in your house, you will eat it. I don't know any of us who are capable of having something which is not great for us, but really nice tasting in the house that we're used to having. And if we know it's there, we just can't stay away from it. So don't bring it in the house. So number 3, supermarket Trojan horse, don't fall for that. Don't bring it in the house. Only bring in the house the ingredients for the 3 simple meals that I've spoken about. And then rule number 4 is use variety with rule number 2. So those 3 meals, porridge, the variety for me is different fruits, maybe some cinnamon, maybe seeds, but I don't really, you don't have to do that at this stage. You know, much more important, as I said, rule number 1, stop adding the products which are giving you the problem in the first place. Porridge can be fruits generally, different fruits to use. Sultanas, I put them in water the night before, so they plump up, they become very sweet. You know, throw those in as you're making the porridge, making the oats, and it's fantastic. The burgers and fries and the rice and vegetables can both be changed up with different spices or different herbs, and they can change. They can be very, very different tastes in exactly the same ingredients, or apart from the herbs and spices. And finally, number 5, Jeanne just talked about water. People ask me, what can I drink? Is it okay to drink alcohol? Is it okay to drink energy drinks? Is it okay to, just forget all of that, drink water, end of, keep it really simple. So when you're starting out and you want to make a good start and get some great results for yourself, I would say, stop putting in, first of all, the stuff which is causing a problem. Get 3 simple meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner that you could eat all the time. Don't bring any rubbish into the house. Beware of the supermarket Trojan horse. Bring some variety into them with spices and herbs, and drink only water.
That was awesome. And I love the fact that you talked about, 3 simple meals, because I'll ask my husband and say to him, honey, what would you like me to make? Because on Sundays, I'll do the batch cooking. And, and I'll be in the kitchen for a couple of hours and I'll make lunch for the week. And I said, what do you want me to make? It's like, what? Mexican lasagna. And I'm like, we're on week 18. I can make other things. No, I'm good. And he's quite happy with that. So like you said, you have a same routine. And once you get down to those, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, 8 dishes that you make all the time, then you're on autopilot. And that is pretty amazing. So yeah, I think we're on week 18, Mexican lasagna at our house. So
I'll never get to week 18.
And now we have Dr. Frank Sabatino talking about stepping up to an SOS-free lifestyle, the evolution of a plant-exclusive diet.
When making a shift to a plant-based or a plant-exclusive diet is really a big jump for many people to begin with. So I don't want to minimize that, because that's a remarkable accomplishment as you make the shift, as Gareth talks about, getting away from meat and dairy and some of these things that we know are compromising our health. But it's intriguing that when people make those shifts, some of them still have issues with food craving. They still have issues with reactive weight gain. They still have difficulty balancing their hormonal environment. And we've come to find that in a number of the products that they're using, even from the plant-based world, they can still have additives and things that will be stuff that makes it harder for them to be successful sometimes in recovering certain aspects of health or weight regulation or whatever. And so what we've come to realize is that when we move into this way of eating, the next step up is to have it in a way that is really without any added salt, oil, and sugar. And this has become known as the kind of a non-SOS or an SOS-free plant-exclusive or plant-based approach. And a number of people have adopted this as kind of the next step on their path to eating in more of a vegan and plant-based manner. And what we find is that that step up really does manifest in some improvements that really help them deal with roadblocks that they may have been hitting. So for example, we know that if you look at the junk food industry, most of those refined products are fundamentally tasteless. They're processed chemical components that basically have no taste. So how are you going to get self-respecting primates like us to pluck down all of our hard-earned cash to buy this stuff that's fundamentally tasteless? Well, you're going to have to add back things that give us that dopamine rush, that give us that brain-related pleasure. And these things tend to center around the addition of salt, oils, and sugar. So those are the 3 biggest additives in the food processing industry, because it's the only way you can urge people to buy products that they would probably find really reprehensible and tasteless. So what we've come to find is that when you move in a plant-exclusive manner and you also then address that, we find that people have more satisfaction in a quicker way with the simplicity of the meals that you and Gareth have just talked about, or the people I've worked with clinically. After a day or two of adopting that way of eating where you eliminate salt, oil, and sugar, they're feeling less cravey, they have less food addictions. And so we know, for example, that salt, which is fundamentally made up of sodium is an essential mineral in the human body. But we need it in very small amounts because the body tends to hold on to sodium like a miser. What it turns over more dramatically is potassium. And when you look at plant-based foods, one of the things that hits you is that plant-based foods are off the charts in potassium and fundamentally very low in sodium. So if you want to look at a diet that's most suited for human consumption, that diet should really be very low in sodium and off the charts in potassium. So we need sodium, but we need it in such small amounts. So the statement has been made that we maybe need 1,000 milligrams of sodium a day. Most Americans, for example, can be taking 3,000 to 4,000 plus a day. So they're reinforcing inflammation from sodium. They're reinforcing fluid retention, raising blood pressure, increasing the risk of heart and brain disease. They're increasing osteoporotic change. People don't realize that when sodium content goes up, the body will actually lose calcium through the kidney more preferentially, and we pull it out of bone to balance the bloodstream. So it can lead to osteoporotic change. So we find that when we get away from adding sodium, and understand that conditions our sense of taste. So people that are used to sodium, there's a high threshold in their mouth before they can taste anything. So that's why many of you may know, and my father was this way. Before he tasted anything, he had a salt shaker going. And his statement would be, oh, the food is tasteless. And I would look at him and say, Dad, the food's not tasteless. You are. Because you can't taste anything till it exceeds that threshold of stimulation. So it's intriguing that when people fast or they get into eating more plant-based, one of the first things that happens is they start tasting things that they were unaware of before. Their sensitivity of taste improves. And so, getting rid of that salt eliminates that. We know that the body needs fats and oils, but we recommend it only in the whole foods in which it is contained, whether that's avocado or greens or nuts and seeds. When you isolate fat from the food chain and put it in big bottles of liquid fat and then subject it to high heat, you're creating a whole range of health issues. So for example, we never recommend bottled oil. So getting rid of oil from cooking and food prep, because what happens when you make an oil? You're stripping away all of the nutrients. You're getting rid of all of the fiber that plant has. And now all you're doing is concentrating the calorie density of that fat and eliminating the opportunity for the body to have nutrients. So for example, if you look at something like walnuts or avocado, they've got really high quality oil, but remarkable fiber and other nutrients. You create an oil like an olive oil, and now what you've got is 100% fat. There's no fiber. The other nutrients are stripped away, and now you have issues that can affect heart disease, blood pressure. We know that when those oils are processed, what's going to happen? They're going to generate glycation end products. They're going to generate things that increase, as you mentioned, oxidation and free radical damage. We know that when fats, especially isolated, transformed fats, these processed fats and oils that are subjected to high heat and pressure in cooking, like in French fries and junk food, that fat becomes altered. The architecture is changed. It becomes transformed. And we know that dramatically increases inflammation and the risk of heart disease. So we want to get our fats and oils in those whole foods. And when we're eating those plant-based foods that are not processed, like whole grains and deep greens and walnuts and chia seeds, we're getting those anti-inflammatory essential fatty acids. But so many Americans are eating those processed oils like safflower and corn oil and all of that, which creep into all of their junk foods and producing and aggravating the inflammatory pathways in the body. So we want fats and oils, but we don't need it added to food. And I know this is a big step for people because we're all brought up cooking with oil. I mean, I grew up in an Italian household. At the end of the day, entering my Italian household, as you entered the door, you would douse with oil. It was a religious ritual, So the bottom line is, once you get away from cooking with oil, you realize how easy it is to cook in a little veggie broth or to cook in just water with a little bit of added herbs and spices. And I urge people to really make those steps, using more of the herbs, garlic, oregano, basil, turmeric, all of those beautiful things that can now enhance the flavor of these foods without adding salts and oils to everything. And of course, the final thing which you alluded to was, of course, refined sugar, which again has its own issues with promoting reactive weight gain and affecting insulin function and creating breast density in young women, creating the increase in the risk of breast cancer. And we know the refined sugars, as it goes up, becomes a cancer generating process. So look, we need these things in the diet, but I always tell people fruit and vegetables need to be your sweet. There's nothing sweeter, especially this time of year, which is the season to be jolly. All the peaches, plums, nectarines, melons, berries, all of these beautiful things are coming out now. Fruit needs to be your sweet. We don't need any added sugar. We don't need that dopamine rush that reinforces addiction and craving. And as you start simplifying the diet, and you prepare those foods without added salt, oil, and sugar, you start to create a sensitivity and taste that blows you away. You're starting to appreciate the nuances and tastes of everything. You're getting rid of those inflammatory and oxidative components of food that are reinforced by all of that added salt, oil, and sugar. And you're creating a health process and a simplification process that really takes you to the next level. So I urge people that eating plant-based is remarkable. If you can make that step and start moving in that direction of eating plant-exclusive while eliminating the added salt, oil, and sugar, it will take you to that next level.
That is amazing, Frank. And I just have to share with you, my husband and I, we were on the road and we stopped at a restaurant and we were in line, and thank goodness the line was long, because I got out my cell phone and I started Googling, because they have an app on the website that you can look at. Okay, they have 2 different types of beans. They had salsa, they had guacamole, they had rice. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. I could eat here. So I went down the line and picked out all the things that I thought were going to be good for me. Okay. I couldn't believe at the end of it, you could see the list. I couldn't believe it was 2.5 times the daily nutritional requirement for salt.
Right.
So I was getting 2.5 days of salt in that one meal. If I had eaten there, and I said to my husband, we can't eat here. We can't. There is no possible way. You will have to take me to the emergency room, because one of the things I've learned in peeling back the layers of the onion in my health, my journey, is I am extraordinarily salt sensitive. Any salt at all, in any foods will raise my blood pressure.
And for people with inflammatory diseases, it will aggravate that. One of the good strategies is that when you're coming away from salt, because there is an addiction to it, is that you can take a little pinch of salt, iodized salt, and just sprinkle it on the top of something, potato or whatever, rather than cooking with it. So you'll have just that little bit of taste in the process as you're making the shift. And that'll help you without now that hidden salt that's added within everything and kind of incorporates itself through this cooking. So that's a good little strategy when you're trying to make that shift. But over time, you'll find yourself needing all of it less and less. And especially with oils, when you get away from cooking with them and adding them to everything, you realize how much more savory and how much better you feel eating those foods without all that added oil and fat, just aggravating everything.
Maybe it's a bloke thing, I don't know. But one of the massive benefits of cooking without oil is the dishes are so much easier to do.
It's not at first, it's funny when you go to chefs or you come from families like I did, the idea of not cooking with oil is so, it's just blows people's minds. But once you get away from that and you realize you can saute in a little balsamic vinegar or a little bit of broth or a little bit of something like that, veggie broth, it really becomes a very simple adjustment, and you don't lose anything in terms of flavor or taste or anything. And again, people don't realize that some of these plant oils, things like coconut oil, can be 85% saturated fat. And so some of these plant oils in concentrated form are creating not only the advanced glycation end products, which we know promote aging and inflammation, but they are adding to cholesterol, heart disease, and the like. And, when we give talks and we start challenging things like coconut oil, the first sound in a vegan audience is, it's one more thing you're taking away. But the truth is, those oils can be quite compromising to high quality health, even though they're plant-based. And that's very important, because there's an illusion of that in the plant-based world that's fooling a lot of people, thinking they're eating in a very healthy way by adding those plant oils when in fact they're not.
I don't think it's just a bloke thing,
Not
Gareth.
just a bloke thing. Yes, I agree.
No, when I go to the carnivores, that's my family, and we have our family gatherings and stuff like that. And I'm usually, in the kitchen helping to clean up afterwards. And you always get that meat pan, and I'm just like, it's just like so disgusting to me. And I'm just like cleaning this, going, really? Ew, this is just so. You get the oil and the fat and everything else from the animal, and I'm always like this. And it's so hard to clean the pans. I'm just used to like and done. And plant-based cooking is so easy to clean. So I don't think it's just a bloke thing there, Gareth.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
No, because I've got to chime in there as well and say I have never been happier in the kitchen since going SOS free, because you're quite right, Gareth. Doing the dishes now is an absolute pleasure, not a chore. So it makes a heck of a difference. It's just a small little tweak, little life hack, isn't it? But my goodness, it really makes a big difference. So yeah, I think the thing with what I was just going to say to pick up on what you were saying, Frank, I think it's interesting how as a societies, we're so brainwashed, by the big, wheels that grind behind big food, big agriculture, and so on. So the idea that, we must have olive oil because it's good for us. It contains XYZ number of antioxidants. You must add coconut oil to your food because of the MCTs and so on. And then you've got people saying, and you must add coconut oil to your coffee and become bulletproof. All of this absolute arrant nonsense that's going on out there. It's quite scary, really, isn't it? And the problem is that there are people are so concerned about their health and their health challenges that, I think everybody's not just grasping for solutions, but I think because of the 24/7 always on society that we live in, people are actually grasping for magic bullets. And I think that is a huge problem within society because we want quick fixes. But I think if people could just realize that not just transitioning to becoming plant-based and how easy and straightforward that is, as Gareth rightly explained and gave us that 5-step plan. What you're talking about, Frank, taking it a step on further for most people by going SOS free, it seems to be very daunting. But actually, what I've noticed is that, and I noticed it in myself as well, having been a plant-based vegan for all of those years and then transitioning to SOS free, I found that my palate, and I'm just as much of a foodie as anybody else, my palate changed really within a week to 10 days. It doesn't take that much to actually make the transition, and it's not as scary as a lot of people think.
I remember Andrew Spudfit Taylor. He had suffered from food addiction. He's down in Australia, down under, and he had gone a whole year just eating potatoes. And then after the first time he had come back to actually eating food, he ate berries and he put it in his mouth and he's like, oh my God, did berries always taste this good? Because his taste buds had started to come back.
I was just saying, thank you, Jeanne. That is so fascinating. It really is.
So let's jump into the lovely Jayney with resilience, about what it is and why it is so important now.
Thank you so much, Jeanne. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure always to be with you guys. Right, so we're going to talk about something that is a little bit aside from the nutrition, from all the other things that we've just been speaking about now. Of course, as you know, I completely embrace that and wholeheartedly. However, there are other aspects that we need to consider for a long, healthy, happy life. The one that I want to address today is the topic of resilience. What is resilience? Well, it can be conceptualized as that bounce back ability. Some people call it the rubber ball effect. It's sort of, we can again conceptualize it by saying it's mental toughness and grit. And if we do everything right, you know, the right amount of salt, oil and sugar, the right amount of berries and whole foods and all of those wonderful things. If we lack the ability to be resilient in life in general, the chances are that we're going to have very, very deeply stressful lives where we are just simply spinning our wheels, not really able to do much of anything either for ourselves or for our loved ones and for society as a whole. So how do we cultivate these incredible qualities? The idea of mental toughness and grit sounds pretty harsh and possibly a bit sort of macho, but in actual fact, they are the highest form of self-compassion. In fact, I like to think of them as being a recognition deep within ourselves that we are worth saving, worth protecting and nurturing. And, you know, it actually takes grit and determination to do all of this, especially in such challenging circumstances that we've been seeing throughout COVID-19 and lockdown and so on. When I was doing some research for a completely different article on a totally different topic, I came across something that spoke to me, a quote actually by Viktor Frankl, that really spoke to me in terms of what we can, or how we can conceptualize resilience. And I think this is so helpful. He said, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. And that is, and I'm paraphrasing, to say, so what he said was to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, or to choose one's own way. That is the ultimate freedom, according to Viktor Frankl, and he knew a thing or two about that. Obviously, he's as an absolute poster child for the fine art of cultivating resilience under horrific circumstances. So when we are faced with adversity and tragedy and more, what can we do to actually get that bounce back ability? There's an awful lot actually, and it's not all just about becoming really mentally tough and being really macho about it and going and sort of, you know, doing all of those macho exercises of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and doing your morning startup plan like all those young internet dudes are trying to tell us to do. It's so much more subtle than that. And I know, Frank, that, you know, this will speak to where you're coming from to a massive degree, which is in the sort of the Taoist, or I suppose it is the Taoist philosophy, which is that we need to have that sort of 75%, 80% rule of not overdoing things, but always keeping a little in reserve. So the Taoists will say, eat until you're 80% full or 70% full, depending upon who you read. The idea of mental toughness is, yes, I mean, push yourself, but don't over push yourself, don't over stress yourself in any situation. By doing so, and by overworking, you will burn out, as I know to my cost. I mean, this is something that I struggle with constantly because I'm juggling so many different balls in the air, and I end up, you know, sometimes I'll be at my desk until sort of midnight, gone midnight, and burning the midnight oil, as they say. And I'll take a good long hard look at myself and go, gosh, you know, you really need to go back to, you know, walking your talk, kid, and get to bed before 10 o'clock at night. So how do we actually develop resilience? Are there certain steps that we can take? Well, the good news is, yes, we can. And it's like a muscle. The more we exercise this, we will get stronger and better at it. So it takes practice, and it also takes intentionality. So what I suggest people to do is to focus on the following components that will help you and empower you to withstand and learn from difficult and traumatic experiences. So try any of the following. When I was doing the research for today, I discovered that relationships and the way that we nurture relationships have a massive amount to do with our ability to be resilient. So if we can connect with trustworthy, empathetic, compassionate individuals who validate us as human beings, rather than isolating ourselves when things become hard, and as much as you want to, sort of don't hide under the duvet, but actually get yourself up and get yourself connecting to people. This is where help and support come from. So resilience isn't all about us and us being strong and tough. Resilience is about being vulnerable enough to be able to understand where and when you need help, and the strength is in asking for that help. There's no strength in being so locked in and so tough that you become an island. No man is an island. Actually, it makes me sort of think of certain Simon and Garfunkel songs. It's a very, very interesting. The art of resilience is very, very interesting, and people misunderstand it to such a massive degree. So I'd like people to go away and have a good think about how they can find a group of people with whom they can have a common interest. The idea is that working together towards a common goal is massively strengthening. It gives us something to live for, a reason. And when we have a reason to carry on, a reason to live, then we do. No two ways about it, no ifs, buts, or maybes. There's a wealth of research data showing that connection with others can actually add around 9 healthy years to our lives. So it's not to be sniffed at all. One of the other approaches that we might like to look at is the development of mindfulness. Now, if we can do little practices like mindful journaling, coloring books. In fact, actually, I interviewed a really fascinating lady just recently on the art of being creative. And she came up with this most amazing exercise. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's called Join the Dots. And what you'll do is you'll start with a blank piece of paper and draw a dot on it. And then just close your eyes and randomly put another dot somewhere else, and then another dot somewhere else, and then another dot somewhere else. And then the idea is that you join those dots in any way that seems appealing to you. And then you can color in possibly spaces or shapes that you've made, or you can do little doodles within them and so on. The idea is that you add a dot a day. So this beautiful creation that you're making, or it might not be beautiful to your eyes, but it is a creation. It's a creative process. Each day you add to it. And what this does is it breaks down your creativity barriers, and it allows you to create without having any kind of self-judgment, which is so crucial. When you can suspend self-judgment, you can begin to create. And if you can begin to create, your resilience levels shoot through the roof. This also feeds into the idea of mindfulness-based stress reduction, which of course was largely developed by John Kabat-Zinn. And the way that he talks about MBSR actually really combats problems, genuine problems like post-traumatic stress disorder. And this can actually develop as a result of some of the stressors that we've been subject to under COVID-19, under lockdown and so on. So there are plenty of MBSR resources online. And if you go to my website, then you'll actually find a relaxation response instructional recording. It's a completely free download that I've just put out there. It's quite nice to be able to just close your eyes and listen to somebody just talking you through the process in order to learn how to do it, rather than have to look at a book and read what you're supposed to do, sit there, close your eyes and try to do it, and then read again. Am I doing this right? And sit and close your eyes. It just doesn't work, does it? So that's what that is for there. Mental and emotional resilience is enhanced by physical resilience. How do we do that? Well, clearly we have to eat the right things, put the right fuel into our bodies. Of course, you know from all of the research, all of the huge data studies out there, from the AHS studies right the way through to the China studies and further, we know that eating a whole food plant-based diet is the way to go, because it reduces inflammation and improves health in every single measure. So that's non-debatable. I think we would all agree. But what else do we need to do? Well, of course, as you were saying, Jeanne, hydration, absolutely crucial. If you are not hydrated correctly, as you said, if your mental function and your decision-making abilities are incredibly compromised. We've also got issues like ample sleep, making sure that your sleep is really good. Adopting what they call good sleep hygiene practices are very important. So it's important to sleep in a fully darkened room. If you don't have a fully darkened room, then get yourself one of those sleep masks that actually stops the light from getting in. You can get some that really fit well now. Use earplugs if you're a light sleeper and noise bothers you. So making sure that you do get a good, ideally around about 7 hours of sleep a night is crucial for your mental, emotional and physical health. And lastly, I'd like to just mention that resilience is also massively improved by exercise. I always conceptualize exercise as a three-legged stool. Really importantly, we've got to get out every day and walk for at least half an hour a day, come rain, come shine, come hail. It's got to be done. So that takes us into the realms of steady state cardio. So I'm not a great believer, because it's noisy out there. So I'm not a great believer in doing things like hits and so on, high intensity training, because what happens with that is that people start it with great intentions, but what actually happens when we're doing interval training is that it's very, very, very hard. If you want to do it correctly, you've got to go all out until you're virtually physically sick. It's really off-putting for most people. Most people, unless they're trained athletes, are not capable of getting into the training zones required those doing high intensity interval training. So I like people to go out and do half an hour walk every day. I like people to go and do resistance training, which is either body weight training or lifting weights. You can get really creative at home if your gyms are not yet open. They're not open in the UK and won't be for the foreseeable future. And so, there are lots of different ways you can do push-ups, press-ups, pull-ups, all of those sorts of things, just to use your own body weight to put stress onto those bones and those muscles. I'm talking about good stress, not bad stress. And finally, think about doing the mindful types of exercise. For me, these include yoga, they include Pilates, which is a mind-body exercise, the yogas, the Tai Chi, Qigong, all of those that really connect your mind to your body. If we can do all of those, then we're going to be putting ourselves into a really good position to become far, far more resilient and to be able to deal with stressors as and when they occur in our lives, as they inevitably will.
I think what you talked about in terms of getting together as a community is brilliant, because, and I just want to shout out to Plant Pure Nation, because they have, after the movie came out, they put out a grassroots initiative to create Plant Pure Nation pods around the country and the world. And so people get together to share a plant-based lifestyle. And so sharing that journey with other people is phenomenal. And just having that, and I've just noticed, like, as I've changed in my life, that my circle of friends has changed as well. And so I'm hanging out with other people that are plant-based and enjoying this lifestyle. It's not that I don't have friends from my previous carnivore days. I still do, but I notice now how much different my social circle has changed because of this, and how much more positive an impact it has. And then that, again, goes back to your resilience. So having that support in that community is amazing. So check out, if you haven't seen Plant Pure Nation, check out the pods. I'm sure there's a pod near you. And if not, why not start one? You can do it through your church or local community center. I can't say enough about it. And just connecting with other like-minded people is phenomenal.
Yeah, let me just chime in. That was a fantastic presentation, Jayney. Thank you. You and I are both big fans of Steve Southwick, he's one of the leading resilience researchers in the world. And in his book, it was really interesting to me that at the Hanoi Hilton, which was the worst prisoner of war camp probably in the history of man and the history of war in the Vietnam War, these guys were subjected to levels of torture that no one can even fathom. And I mean for 6, 7, 8 years. John McCain was one of those people that went through the Hanoi Hilton. It was interesting that those guys developed a form of communication where they had almost like a Morse code that they created by tapping on these stone walls of these torture chambers that they were in, that allowed them to have some sense of communication with the other prisoners that were going through the same torture. And just that sense of social connection saved the lives of many of those men under the most horrific conditions. So just that little sense of social connection had such an impact on helping them be resilient in the face of the most extreme forms of torture. And he also talks about optimism and altruism. You know, when we talk about, do you see the glass half empty or half full? I mean, we all encounter stressful events. The question is, how do we frame those? And how do we see those? How do we perceive those? So there's no absolute stress. It's all about perception. And are we doing things without any idea of monetary or gain to ourselves altruistically? He makes the point strongly that those simple things of perception, altruism, and communication, as you so aptly described, go a long way to creating remarkable resilience in the face of the most profound traumatic stresses. So I find that remarkable, and I appreciate your presentation. It was great.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for mentioning Stephen Southwick. What an absolutely incredible man he is. His book is called Resilience. Stephen Southwick, Professor Stephen Southwick, and he is the man, and he is the most charming, gentleman. He's a gentleman. And we had the pleasure of hosting him at the NHA conference. He was there in January when Frank and I were both speaking. So it was a great privilege to have met him there. So for everybody, his book is definitely worth getting. It reads very, very well. It's fascinating. Interestingly enough, you're talking about, the glass half full or glass half empty. The way I like to conceptualize that in terms of resilience is, I think with resilience, you've got to be realistic. You can't take a Pollyanna approach and go, oh yeah, la 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 la, I'm in dire circumstances, but my glass is still, half full. It helps to be able to take a really accurate assessment of your current situation. So for me, when, for example, I may acknowledge that my glass right now is half empty, but I have the ability to refill that glass should I choose to do so. So it's, there is an element of realism, but there's also an element of optimism. And what we know from the research is that people who are more optimistic, who are not falsely optimistic, but people who are genuinely and rationally optimistic, do live longer and they live healthier. So that's probably really grammatically correct. But what they're doing is they're extending their health span and their lifespan at the same time. So yeah, it's a fascinating. I could go on all day. I won't keep you guys because it's a topic that's dear to my heart.
Jayney, that was a great presentation. I really enjoyed that. How do you think COVID-19? The first point you made was about relationships. How do you think the lockdowns affected people in the UK, for instance?
Well, yeah, I can speak to the UK because, of course, I'm here. It has taken a massive toll on people's mental health. Now, having said that, there are also the most extraordinary things that are happening to support people. So we've had a big realization in the UK because there was, prior to COVID-19, one of the biggest health issues was male suicide. It's the leading cause of death in men under 30 in the UK. And so, we've had this campaign about having discussions, talk it out, talk to people and so on. So that prior to going into COVID, there was this massive emphasis on mental health care in the UK. So thank goodness for that. So, you've got people like the English National Ballet doing online ballet classes for people every day at 11 o'clock. Got a wonderful, really famous choir master who's made lots of wonderful uplifting TV programs doing the UK's national choir. So everybody gets online at 5 o'clock and has a good old isolated sing-song with hundreds of thousands of other people, if not millions of other people simultaneously. So there have been some extraordinary developments, but the flip side is we have seen an increase in isolation. The government here has a wonderful outreach program where if you were one of the people who was self-isolating, so you're by yourself and you're completely alone. They've actually developed a system whereby people will phone you on a weekly basis to check in and see how you're doing. Do you need anything? Do you need food? Do you need company? What do you need? Can we Skype? Can we Zoom? So the government has actually instigated that outreach program, which I thought was brilliant. There have been lots of independent people doing lovely things within the Complementary Medical Association. Been doing weekly practice development tutorials that have been going down an absolute bomb in order to not just support people during COVID from a moral and sort of moral perspective. I wouldn't dream of doing that from a morale perspective, and also helping them pivot their businesses so that they're coming out of COVID not just stronger, but with more options from a business perspective as well. So we've all been doing our bit. So actually, I think it could have gone a lot worse than it actually has done. And people are just really excited about, getting out of lockdown. So yeah, it's overall looking positive. I mean, certainly we do know that there's been an uptick in reports of domestic violence, child abuse and so on. So, that's the reality of the situation. We can't duck that reality. But people are able to get help. This is the good thing about it. They've put codes in place because obviously if you're a person living with a coercive, controlling partner, you may need to use code in order to contact other people and to let them know that you're in danger and things like that. So even coding, interesting, coming back to what Frank was saying about, the coding that was used by the prisoners of war. So they've actually got coding so you can actually pick up the phone and say to somebody, blah, 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 and there will be help, So it has really changed things and shifted things, but overall, I think in quite a positive way in many, many, many circumstances.
Okay. Gareth, in the US, these last 3 months, there have been more suicides than all of last year combined. All the previous 12 months before that. Comparing it to the last 3 months, there's been more suicides in the U.S. in the last 3 than the previous 12 months.
Wow.
And that doesn't include all of the increase in addiction and everything else because people are staying home, consuming more alcohol. So yeah, there's been issues with this distancing because we're animals that are not meant to do that, frankly. We're just not. We're meant to socially interact. So that's coming out now. Jayney brought up all of that, and there's a lot of resources to fix that and help that. But it is something that we pay a price for.
So thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions you would like us to dive into, you can contact us through our brand new website, healthchangers.net. So you can connect with all 4 of us on that site. If there's something that you want us to dive into, please do connect. Your health is worth working for. Make every bite count. Make every action help your body. It's either helping you or it's not. All of us here can help you on your journey. So reach out, healthchangers.net. Thank you so much for joining us today.